Some of the most powerful bands of the 60s and 70s didn't decline, they didn't slow down, they didn't gradually lose their audiences over years of bad albums and empty venues. They self-destructed in seconds. One decision, one night, one moment where everything that had taken years to build came apart faster than anyone in the room could stop it. These are the bands who had it all and handed it back before the decade was finished. Stay with me, because the number one story on this list ended in 16 words and 14 years of silence. Number 10, Buffalo Springfield. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. By the spring of 1967, Buffalo Springfield had something most bands spend entire careers chasing. Neil Young and Stephen Stills, both under 25, writing and performing together in the same band. Their single, For What It's Worth, hit in January of that year and immediately sounded like the only honest thing on the radio. Rock critics called it a generational statement. They weren't wrong. They lasted 2 years. Neil Young walked off stage mid-show multiple times in 1967, not once, multiple times. Visa complications gave him a practical excuse, but the real issue was simpler. Young and Stills were both forces of nature who could not share the same creative space without it turning into a war. Publishing disputes started almost immediately. Legal arguments followed. By the time they played their final show in Long Beach in May 1968, they had released 3 albums and generated enough internal conflict to fill a decade. Both went on to build legendary careers. Stills formed Crosby, Stills, and Nash within months. Young became one of the most influential musicians of the next 50 years. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look. What they might have created together, sustained, fully formed, across a real run of albums. Nobody ever found out. 2 years. 2 of the greatest talents of the era in the same band, gone before anyone understood what they were watching. Buffalo Springfield burned from the inside out. What happened next is different. One man's mind started fracturing and he took the whole band down with him. Number 9. Fleetwood Mac, original lineup. The Fleetwood Mac. The world eventually fell in love with. Rumors, Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, was the second version of the band. The original, formed in London in 1967, was built around one guitarist, Peter Green. B.B. King called him the only white guitarist who could make him sweat. Eric Clapton stepped aside and said Green was better. The recordings Green made between 1967 and 1969, Black Magic Woman, Albatross, Oh Well, were operating at a level most musicians never reach. I've flown across every time. By 1970, he was giving his royalty checks away to strangers on the street. What happened to Peter Green on the European touring circuit in 1969 has been pieced together across interviews and biographies. Heavy LSD use accelerated a psychological collapse that was already beginning. He came back from Germany a different person. He told the band they needed to donate everything they earned to charity. When they couldn't agree, he left. Quietly. In May 1970, just gone. The band he left behind eventually became one of the best-selling acts of the 1970s without him. Peter Green spent most of that decade in and out of psychiatric institutions. He worked as a gravedigger. He lived in near poverty for years, while the band bearing his name sold out arenas worldwide. He built everything. They say I'm a man of the world. Walked away from everything, and the world he left behind became more famous without him than it ever was with him. Peter Green's collapse came from inside his own mind. The next collapse came from something far more controllable. And that's what makes it so painful to watch. Number 8. Creedence Clearwater Revival. Good job in the city. 5 albums in 2 years. Between 1968 and 1970, Creedence Clearwater Revival released 5 records and charted more singles simultaneously than any other act in the country. Proud, Mary, Bad Moon Rising, Fortunate Son, Have You Ever Seen the Rain? John Fogerty's voice was on the radio so constantly it felt like a natural phenomenon. They played Woodstock in 1969. They were untouchable. Then Fogerty made one decision, and it was over. The other members had grown frustrated that Fogerty wrote everything, every song, every hit, every album track, all him. They wanted creative equality. In 1971, under mounting pressure, Fogerty agreed to give each member equal songwriting space on their next album. The album was called Mardi Gras. When it dropped in 1972, critics destroyed it. Without Fogerty writing everything, the gap between his abilities and the rest of the band was visible to anyone who listened. Tom Fogerty had already quit. By October 1972, the remaining three voted to dissolve. The legal fallout stretched for decades. Fogerty's dispute with the record label meant he refused to perform CCR songs live for years, including Proud Mary. He performed it publicly again only after a legal settlement in the 1990s. He gave the band what they asked for, and what they asked for destroyed everything they'd built. CCR imploded under internal pressure and one bad creative call. The next band had no bad creative calls, just two people who needed each other and couldn't stand each other at the same time.
Before we continue, can I ask you for a small favor? There's something I honestly don't understand. Only about 10% of the people who watch Nostalgia Rock YT are actually subscribed. That means more than 90% of viewers enjoy the videos, listen to the music, relive the memories, and then leave without subscribing. And if I'm being honest, that can be a little heartbreaking, because these videos don't just appear. Every upload takes hours of research, fact-checking, script writing, editing, and preserving the stories behind the music we all love. We do all of that because these songs deserve to be remembered. So when thousands of people watch and enjoy the content, but only a few take a second to subscribe, it sometimes feels like the work is being appreciated, but the people behind it are being forgotten. If this channel has ever helped you rediscover a song, relive a memory, or simply made your day a little better, please take 1 second to subscribe. It's completely free, but it's the biggest way you can support what we do. Every subscription encourages us to keep going, keep creating, and keep preserving the music that means so much to all of us. Thank you for being here. Now, let's get back to the music.
Number 7, Simon and Garfunkel. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel had been singing together since they were 11 years old. By 1970, those two voices, built together over 20 years of shared instinct, had produced The Sound of Silence, Mrs. Robinson, The Boxer, and Bridge Over Troubled Water. The Bridge album alone spent 10 weeks at number 1 and won 5 Grammys, including Album of the Year. In 1981, when they announced a free concert in Central Park, 500,000 people showed up. They hadn't spoken properly in years by then. The Bridge Over Troubled Water sessions were described by both men in separate interviews across decades as among the most miserable experiences of their professional lives. Garfunkel was filming Catch-22 and Missing Sessions. Simon was writing the entire album alone and already building a solo career in the parallel. The title track, one of the best-selling singles in recording history, was sung almost entirely by Garfunkel, a decision Simon later admitted he sometimes deeply regretted. By summer of 1970, the album was at number 1 and the duo was finished. No announcement, no farewell tour. Two people who had sung together since childhood agreed after their greatest success to stop. The 1981 Central Park reunion drew 500,000 people. A full reunion album was planned, partially recorded, and abandoned when the same tensions resurfaced. They made their masterpiece while they were already falling apart, and walked away the moment the applause started. Still ahead, a backstage argument that created 14 years of silence from one of the biggest bands in rock history. And the number 1 entry, the 16 words that ended everything forever with no way back. Number 6, T-Rex. Number 5, Cream. When Cream formed in London in the summer of 1966, Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, all three were already considered among the best musicians in British rock. Together, they created something that didn't have a name yet, a power trio stretching blues structures into 20-minute live performances that left audiences completely locked in. Sunshine of Your Love, White Room, Crossroads. Their 1968 farewell concert at the Royal Albert Hall sold out in hours. Clapton was 23 years old when he decided to end it. He had read one music review, one, by critic John Landau, arguing that Cream had become formulaic, that the improvisation audiences loved had hardened into repetition. Clapton took that single piece of criticism seriously enough to begin planning the band's dissolution. He had also become obsessed with the band's debut album, Music from Big Pink, something grounded and understated that was the complete opposite of everything Cream stood for. He wanted that. So he ended one of the most powerful bands in the world because of a review and a record he couldn't stop listening to. The Royal Albert Hall farewell, November 26, 1968, was perfect. 2 nights, 10,000 people each night. The band playing at the absolute height of their ability. Then done. They reunited 37 years later in 2005 at the same venue. Millions tried for tickets, thousands got in. They chose to end it at the peak and spent 4 decades proving they couldn't replace what they'd had. Cream ended by choice. What destroyed the next band was imposed on them, and the people who imposed it knew exactly what they were doing. Number 4, Grand Funk Railroad.
And I served my time doing the...
In 1971, Grand Funk Railroad sold out Shea Stadium in 72 hours, faster than the Beatles had managed in 1965. Rock critics hated them. Audiences didn't care. Mark Farner's raw energy and the band's locomotive heaviness connected with working-class rock audiences in ways more celebrated acts never managed. Grand Funk were the people's band, loud, unpretentious, and commercially enormous. Then the man who built them turned around and used the law to freeze them solid.
And I served my time doing the...
Terry Knight had managed Grand Funk from the beginning. He built the promotional machine, the touring infrastructure, the entire commercial apparatus that made them one of the biggest live acts in America. When the band fired him in 1972, Knight filed a lawsuit against them for $50 million. $50 million. The lawsuit froze their assets, complicated their recording contracts, and created a legal tangle that took years to untangle. While the courts worked through it, Grand Funk's commercial momentum, which had been genuinely extraordinary, simply stopped. The specific cultural window in which they had dominated didn't wait for the lawyers to finish. They continued and had further success. We're an American Band reached number 1 in 1973, but the sustained, unstoppable peak was gone. The legal war consumed the years that should have been their best. The man who built the machine used the same machine to take them apart, and it worked exactly as intended. Grand Funk's destruction came from outside, from a manager with a motive. What ended the next story came from forces nobody in the band could control at all. Number 3, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Between 1967 and 1969, Jimi Hendrix did things with a guitar that nobody had done before and very few have managed since. Are You Experienced? Axis Bold as Love, Electric Ladyland. 3 albums in 2 years, each one pushing further than the last. His Monterey performance in June 1967 turned him from a promising act into something that existed in a different category entirely. His Woodstock set in August 1969. Monday morning, most of the crowd already gone, playing the Star-Spangled Banner with feedback and distortion, remains one of the defining images of the entire era. What almost nobody realized that morning was that the band behind him had already ceased to exist. Hendrix disbanded the Experience in January 1969. The split was partly creative. He wanted to move towards something more expansive, more jazz-influenced and partly personal. His relationship with bassist Noel Redding had deteriorated beyond repair. His new project, Band of Gypsies, with Billy Cox and Buddy Miles, played only one proper run of concerts, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day at the Fillmore East, 1970, before Hendrix walked off stage at a Madison Square Garden benefit that same month, telling the audience he wasn't feeling well. He was still renegotiating what came next, still building the new creative vision he described in interviews when he died in London on September 18, 1970. He was 27. The music he was moving toward, the expanded, orchestrated sound he talked about in his final interviews, was never made. He ended the band before the world was ready to let it go and ran out of time to build what came next. Hendrix walked away from what he'd built before his own time ran out. The next story is different. It was one backstage argument, one exchange of words that ended 14 years in a matter of minutes. Number 2. The Eagles. The Eagles were one of the defining commercial forces of the 1970s. Hotel California, Desperado, One of These Nights. Their albums didn't just sell, they became part of the soundtrack of an entire decade. The Long Run, released in 1979, went to number 1. By 1980, they were one of the best-selling acts in the history of recorded music. Everything on the surface suggested a band with years of sustained dominance still ahead. The surface was wrong. Backstage at a benefit concert in Long Beach, California, on July 31, 1980, Don Felder and Don Henley had an argument. It lasted minutes. It ended the Eagles for 14 years. The specifics have been told in various accounts, including Felder's own memoir. What is certain is that it was the breaking point of tensions that had been building for years around money, creative control, and the fundamental dynamics of power within the band. They played that show with the animosity already fully present on stage. In the weeks that followed, Felder was fired. An indefinite hiatus was announced. Don Henley said publicly it would be a cold day in hell before they recorded together again. He was nearly right. They released no new studio material for 28 years. They returned in 1994 with the Hell Freezes Over reunion tour, commercially enormous, demonstrating exactly how patiently the audience had waited. Felder eventually sued the remaining members. What started with one backstage conversation played out across 3 decades of litigation, 14 years of silence from a band that had a decade of music left in them, all of it tracing back to one argument nobody outside that room ever fully heard. The Eagles broke apart loudly and in anger. The number 1 story on this list was the opposite. Quiet, final, and delivered in 16 words that changed everything. Number 1. Led Zeppelin. There is a reasonable argument that no band in the history of rock music was more completely dominant in their moment than Led Zeppelin. Not just commercially, though the commercial numbers are staggering, but in the sheer presence they occupied in the consciousness of anyone who listened to rock in the 1970s. Zeppelin wasn't background music. From the opening seconds of Whole Lotta Love to the full unfolding of Kashmir to the quiet devastation of The Rain Song, they demanded your full attention and rewarded it in ways almost no other band consistently managed. Their 1977 North American tour sold out in hours. Their 1979 performance at Nebworth drew over 200,000 people across 2 nights. In September of 1980, they were the biggest band on Earth On September 25th, 1980, that was over. Forever. John Bonham was found dead at Jimmy Page's home in Windsor that morning. He was 32. He had consumed a staggering amount of vodka across several hours and died in his sleep. There was no deliberation among the remaining 3 members about what came next. None. Bonham was not replaceable. Not in the way Led Zeppelin worked, not for the music they made, not for what he was to the other 3 men in that band. 16 days after his death, on October 4th, 1980, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones released a statement. It read, "We wish it to be known that the loss of our dear friend and the deep sense of harmony felt by ourselves and our manager have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were." That was it. No lengthy explanation, no suggestion that things might change. Just a quiet, final, complete statement from 3 men who understood immediately that what they'd built over 12 years could not exist without the 4th person at the center of it. They reunited once, one single concert at the O2 Arena in London in December 2007, with John Bonham's son Jason on drums. 20 million people registered for the ticket lottery for a venue that held 20,000. That number tells you everything about what the world had been waiting for, and how final the original ending truly was. The biggest band in the world ended in 16 days and 1 paragraph, and everyone who ever loved them understood, without being told, that there was nothing else to say. These weren't bands that ran out of ideas. They weren't bands that lost their audiences slowly or got left behind without knowing it. They were bands at the absolute peak of what they could do. And something happened. A conversation, a decision. A loss, a moment that couldn't be undone. The music they left behind still exists. You can still hear it. You can still feel what it was like the first time. But those specific combinations of people in those rooms making that sound are gone. And in most cases, they were gone faster than anyone was ready for. Which one hits you the hardest? The one that felt most unnecessary, most avoidable, or just most final? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.